Hello everyone and welcome to Ask Better Questions, the podcast where we delve into the nuances of leadership and personal development. I'm your host Peter, and today we're going to discuss the current state of leadership and why we are where we are and what we can do to get away from what we have currently. And why we might even want to do that. Before we start, for those of you who are new here, I'm Peter Adams. I have over 20 years experience in leadership and consulting. I'm a published author and a speaker in the leadership space, and my mission is to help excellent leaders become exceptional leaders with a better mindset. But before we start today's episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Colour4 Solutions. Colour4 Solutions offer leadership training for people who have reached a ceiling in their leadership journey and want to achieve more without dedicating substantial time and effort. So I'll start today's episode by recounting a story. I met a university student recently who wanted to wow me with his grasp of leadership. And he'd been studying it and had done a number of units at university. And he asked me what leadership style was best. And I countered that with, it was similar to asking a mechanic what tool is their favorite. It depends on the job. And I told him what I'm about to tell you. It's one of my mentors once told me that you know you're speaking to a true expert when whatever the question, the answer is always prefaced with, well, it depends. Because true experts weigh up a lot more than what you want to just hear. If you're talking to a salesman, they never say it depends. No, you definitely want the car with all the bells and whistles. And you definitely want to upgrade, and you definitely want, they deal in definites. When you're dealing with an actual expert, you're much more likely to have, well, it depends. Undeterred, that student went on to list 8 different leadership styles. So the first leadership style being autocratic leadership, which we went on to characterize as being centralized decision-making, typically what everyone understands leadership style is. I'm telling you what to do and how to do it. Full control over all decision-making, or at least closely supervised work of all subordinates. The second he mentioned was democratic leadership, which I was a little puzzled by, but he's said it's basically where leaders involve the team in participative decision-making, where you seek input for all the decisions with feedback from team members before any decisions are made. I would struggle to see a situation where this could be greatly useful, but that said, I'm sure they're out there. If you've got a qualified leader who knows what it is that they're trying to achieve, then a democratic leadership option doesn't seem to be incredibly great. But if anyone's heard of anything where democratic leadership has been successful, by all means, let me know. I'd love to know more about it. The next one was transformational leadership. Now, I'll fire through some of these. Servant leadership, transactional leadership, charismatic leadership, laissez-faire leadership, which I would argue is not really leadership at all, and authentic leadership, which was a little bit forced, I feel. So transformational leadership focuses on inspiring and motivating followers to achieve outcomes through charisma, vision. A lot of politicians would argue they're into transformational leadership. Certainly the populist ones. Servant leadership is much more traditional and much closer to how I view leadership. It centers around the idea of leaders serving the needs of their team members and prioritizing their growth, well-being, and development. Now, a servant leader could well be autocratic, and we will get into this in a moment, but transactional leadership involves more traditional exchange-based approach where leaders set clear expectations, rewards, or punishment based on outcomes, predetermined outcomes. So if you hit your and I've seen this work very well in sales teams. If you hit your goals this month, you'll have a job next month. If you fail to hit your goals, then you won't. If you hit these goals, you're going to get a bonus. That works much more in a sales type environment, but it can work in other situations as well. Charismatic leadership is similar to transformational leadership. It relies on personal charm, charisma, persuasion, those sorts of things to inspire and influence your followers. Charismatic leadership often, it's revered and associated with cults and things like that. So typically there's a compelling vision. Sometimes it's only seen by the leader. But the ability to rally others around you through charisma and enthusiasm typically leads to a charismatic leadership style. That said, laissez-faire leadership involves a hands-off approach. Now, this one was puzzling to me because I thought using the term leadership next to laissez-faire was a little bit weak. But this student went on to explain how leaders provide minimal guidance or direction and just basically let the team have considerable freedom and autonomy in decision-making and tasks, etc. So the leader would set a goal and then leave the team to achieve however it is that they, using their skill set or any means possible. Now, this seems to be a fairly decent way of getting yourself sued because your team could approach it in a completely unethical or illegal manner. But that said, laissez-faire leadership was on the list, so I've included it here. And the last one, authentic leadership, and that emphasizes a genuine, transparent nature, and leaders' actions and behaviors and decision-making process is all open for discussion and scrutiny. Now, authentic leaders prioritize honesty, integrity, and self-awareness, fostering trust, collaboration, those sorts of things amongst the team. Now, I then postulated to this student that there are two types of leadership. There is autocratic leadership, which is I'm going to tell you what to do. And then there is the opposite of that, where team members come to you and ask the leader, how should I approach this job? Or I have this problem, how do I overcome it? I have had my peers, who I do not lead, but I am a leader amongst, come to me on numerous instances with problems that I have faced before, and I have told them, right, so you need to know what to do next, or how to have that difficult conversation with your employee, or any one of a number of things. And I've walked them through what I've done in the past, and I've suggested, based on what I know and the situation in their team or the person they're dealing with, how best to approach that. And I've left them with that information. I haven't told them this is what you must do. I have said that's how I would handle it. Now, if you want to go off and do that, that's fine. If you want to go off and get 5 different other people's opinions on how to handle it and then mesh them together, or pick one, or create a blended version of 2 or 3 different methods, it's up to them. They're still the leader. They get to go off and lead their team in their own fashion. But if they're coming to me for an answer and I'm giving them my wisdom, advice, or otherwise, I'm still a leader in that space, and I'm still leading them. If they take my advice, I'm still leading them, but I am not forcing any decisions. I am not being autocratic in my nature. Now, if you're a charismatic leader, you're still telling people what to do. You're still there saying, hey, it might be personal charm, it might be charisma that gets people to follow you, but you're still there prescribing things and saying this is what you must do. If you're a transactional leader, you're still setting the goalposts and you're still advising this is what will happen. If you're a transformational leader, same deal as the charismatic, you're inspiring and motivating people, but still setting down this is what will happen. So the vast majority of leadership is, in fact, autocratic. It's very much, this is what we need, this is the plan, I've been up all evening, or the executive team have handed this down to us from on high. These are the stone tablets that we shall adhere to. And that's any one of a number of servant leadership, transformational leadership, transactional leadership, laissez-faire, even authentic leadership. Fully transparent, these have been handed down from on high, this is what we are following, still autocratic. Still very much, this is what you must do, and you must follow this plan, and this is the plan. Or if you were going to go with laissez-faire, this is the goals that we have in mind, this is what we need to get to. Feel free to go break the law or do whatever it is that you need to do to get these things done. Okay, that's still leadership. But the other alternative is having people come to you and ask you, how do I achieve these goals or whatever else? How do I achieve the plan? And that is also leadership. Now, it's a much smaller part of leadership currently. That needs to get bigger. That needs to be cultivated in all organizations, because that piece is based on experience and knowledge. And sadly, most of my experience in large organizations in this day and age has been that those people with experience that could be the sources and the oracles of information and what to do in these situations have all been let go from organizations, or worse, put into situations where they can no longer be quizzed or they can no longer impart that knowledge. So I said to our young friend, the current and most prevalent style would be autocratic, all right? There's a good reason why it's autocratic, and predominantly that's hardwired into human beings. So being a student of economics, I remember a professor once explaining, and economics, for those of you who are already reaching to switch off the podcast, is a human behavioral study, okay? So this professor was explaining that most large organizations are modeled on the military or on the Catholic Church, which he's pointed out is in fact also modeled on a structure of the military, which is we have a general, we have a leader, we have generals, and then all the way down the line we have officers, and they have men reporting to them. So some generals have other officers reporting to them with many men underneath them, etc. But there's always a hierarchy. And we have hierarchy structures, and this is where we get our org charts from and the like. And that's well and good. And in most large organizations, we need to have some means of organizing these things. However, the good portion of the world is not structured in that way. So, for instance, if you've ever seen Milton Friedman's pencil example, no one person, organizations know how to build pencils, but there's no one organization that builds a pencil. There's lots of different organizations that then get the wood together, get the lead together, get the rubber together, get the little metal brace for the pencil, etc., and put it all together. Now, it might all be assembled in a factory, but all of the inputs to get it there are from a number of different organizations, and they're not structured in tiers like this. The organizations themselves may be, but they're all different organic units. So when we're leading large teams, the efficiency of the military structure provides a necessary conduit to, conduct combat operations. But the types of endeavors that we're trying to lead often are not combat driven. So if we're leading a project delivery team, a software development team, or numerous other teams for that matter, these aren't combat situations. There's no contact with the enemy, so to speak. What we're trying to do here is achieve an outcome. And it's not necessarily take that hill from somebody. It's more a build this bridge. And that's a very different, or build this software program, or create this campaign in an advertising team. And that's a very different battle than contact with the enemy, where we can, at the day's end at 5 p.m. as we're about to clock off, we know whether we had a win or a loss today. Did we sell X number of widgets? Did we meet our KPIs? So that's given rise to some compelling new structures and approaches, like we have Kanban and Agile and others, Scrum or the like. Ultimately, these approaches don't really change the leadership style that we have, but rather the approach to the project actions that are involved. So it could be argued that Scrum leaders do have a different approach, but equally it can be argued that they're still autocratic in nature. They're still prescriptive. This is what we've got to do, etc. These are the things that we have to tick off our plan. So how do we break out of autocratic approaches? And this is the million-dollar question. Well, I believe there's basically a 3-step process, which I will go into in a little bit of detail very lightly today because I don't want this podcast going for hours. But shifting towards a more collaborative leadership method, which is in line with keeping towards people coming to leaders to get explanations or advice on how to achieve the outcomes rather than having the outcomes thrust at them. So the first one is self-reflection and awareness. Now that's self-explanatory. You need to be aware of what it is that we're trying to do, but also what methods are currently being employed. And I am not saying that autocratic methods are bad, because in no stretch is it bad. When we need to get to an outcome, we need to make sure that the team know that's the outcome we're trying to get to. And if people turn up to play chess and football at the same time, it's going to be a very different looking team at the end when we all figure out we're doing one or the other, not both. So self-reflection and awareness, knowing what it is that we're trying to do and knowing what it is that we are currently doing and that we are shifting towards a more collaborative approach is the first and possibly most important step. Now, the second step is empowerment and delegation. In order for a less autocratic approach, you need to empower your team and you need to delegate various tasks to them. Now, this is not laissez-faire leadership. This is empowerment and delegation. So we say you have empowerment over these aspects, these things, you can do this much. Now, as the team grow in skills, more empowerment, more delegation. But empowerment and delegation is the second step. And the last step is cultivating a collaborative culture. So it's the team that's going to achieve your outcomes. It's the team KPIs. It's the team that's going to be measured, and it's the team that need to come together to make it work. That's how you lead. You can lead singular individuals, absolutely, and it can work in some instances. But if we're moving away from an autocratic model into a more collaborative model, you need to collaborate with a team. So just broadly, I've written down some quick thoughts on this process before I wrap up the episode. So self-reflection and awareness, encouraging leaders to engage in introspection and reflection on the leadership style currently being employed. Now that may be autocratic, it may be collaborative, it may be any one of the number of 8 or even something else. It doesn't matter what's currently being employed, but knowing what it is that you're currently doing and the way in which you're doing it means that you can then make the change. Because if you don't know, you can't make that change. So you need to assess the impact of the approach that you're currently doing on team morale, innovation, productivity, those sorts of things. You need to provide opportunities to get feedback from your team and peers and supervisors about the leadership style, whether it's working, what it's best for, where it's not cutting it, and what other suggestions your team may have. You need to offer training and coaching sessions focused on developing self-awareness and empathy and active listening skills. Now, this is not for your team. This is for you. As a leader, you need to have active listening skills. Listen to the team. Listen to your own words to become self-aware. You need to have empathy. Put yourself in your team's shoes and listen to yourself as you talk to your team. Listen to the words that you're saying and what it is that you're communicating to them. I cannot tell you how many team leaders I have met and how many managers I have met and how many executives I have met who have done snooze fests of speeches to their teams, or worse, completely baffled or broke trust with teams by saying things that are blatantly wrong, ill-conceived, in some instances downright abusive to teams, because they were unaware of what it was that they're saying. They've just switched on to a modal. They've given this speech a number of times before to a different audience, and then they've just given it to their team. And it's either, in the best situation, the teams fall asleep. In the worst situations, the team mutiny. And I have seen entire teams at some of the largest organizations I've worked at just quit en masse and go and work at a competitor within a week. And that's just brutal. But that's basically because management have said things that were ill-conceived. Now, I've been guilty of it as well. Earlier on in my career, I have said things that I've been upfront and honest with people who are coming on board to an organization, and I have said, this is going to be hard. Other people in the organization have said, you shouldn't say that to newbies. And I've gone, well, they should know. They're coming into a team that is hard to work for. I expect really good performance, and I do. Is that wrong? When should we tell them? Day one, when they arrive at me at a desk that I am in charge of? Or should we not tell them for the first week and find out when performance reviews come around? So, in regard to empowerment and delegation, I'd written down a few pointers here. Ideally, you want to gain an understanding about the benefits of empowering team members and delegating decision-making authority. You should be highlighting how shared responsibility can lead to increased engagement, creativity, ownership amongst team members. Collaboratively identifying tasks or projects suitable for delegation. This is a skill that you can develop over time, but consider the skills, expertise, interests of team members, future career progression, that sort of thing. These can all be incorporated into the delegation and empowerment discussions. You should be earmarking people who could be future leaders, but that's not the limitation of empowerment and delegation. You should be empowering and delegating to all team members some aspect of the job, some aspect of work. It shouldn't just be for future leaders. Everyone should have the opportunity to lead from the position that they're in. They should be able to be empowered and delegated the authority to at least provide the rest of the team the benefit of whatever expertise they have. And even on day one, somebody will have better expertise on something than other members in the team, and they should be able to share that. They should be encouraged to do so. There should be a provision of support and guidance to everyone in the organization to gradually delegate more and more and more to the team as a whole. So this predominantly, the leader should be supported to delegate more responsibilities to the team members. Encourage the setting of clear expectations, provide necessary resources, offer feedback, and recognition for delegated tasks. There should be recognition in organizations for what is delegated. So finally, cultivating a collaborative culture. Now this sounds like something straight out of a HR textbook, but fostering a culture of open communication, trust, collaboration, those good vibes within a team or organization, and encouraging leaders to facilitate team discussions, solicit input, and actively listen to diverse perspectives, that is gold for an organization. You will grow so much faster once you have a collaborative team working together. You will magnify individual outputs. You need to promote transparency. So part of this is being transparent and sharing information about goals, priorities, decision-making processes within the team itself, and encourage, I guess, the leader in this instance to involve team members in strategic planning and goal-setting activities. Not always, but in a lot of instances, they can help you achieve and identify what is possible in spaces. So again, you should recognize and reward collaborative behaviors in the team and contributions from your team or even other teams. Celebrate those successes, the milestones achieved through teamwork and shared effort. So it should be noted now that there are no silver bullets. And I'm a contrarian in this day and age, as I believe outcomes should be used to measure ultimate success or failure when you're changing leadership style. Now, I am a huge fan of autocratic leadership because predominantly that's what's got us to where we are. And in most instances, that's what's going to cut it. However, the style of autocratic can be any one of the 8 that you've named there, but you should be trying to move towards that collaborative leadership style so that people can ask other people in the team for the benefit of their expertise. We are moving towards a space where AI will incorporate the expertise of many, many people around the globe, millions in fact, but that's not what your competitive advantage lies with. Your competitive advantage is the people in your team, their experience, their knowledge that can be applied faster and more effectively than AI. Now, AI can learn from it, absolutely, but in terms of your team and their performance can be enhanced by getting your team together, working towards a shared goal. I always recommend using whatever method works best. If it's autocratic, autocratic. I often find, though, that autocratic is rarely the best leadership style long-term. Largely, it rids teams of agency. When it comes to outcomes, team members go, yeah, that's great, we met the sales goal or whatever, and we flogged ourselves to do it. And that's not ideal. So we're going to leave today's episode of Ask Better Questions there. I hope you found the insights that we covered today valuable and actionable. If you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe, but more importantly, share it with somebody who you feel needs to hear this. So I'll be back next week with more. Until then, keep asking better questions, and remember, leadership is not about having all the answers, it's about asking the right questions. Take care, and I'll see you back here next week.